Good morning and welcome back to another episode of Grit, Grace, and Growth. I am Laura Navaquin, and today we are addressing the question that many aspiring real estate investors or aspiring investors have, and that is whether you need a real estate license in order to begin investing in real estate. And although today we'll discuss both some advantages and disadvantages to whether you have your license, no right or wrong answer. It's really what you deem is the right decision for you and the path that you want to take. But first off, before we really dig into those advantages and disadvantages, let's clear up the very common misconception that you actually do need a real estate license to begin investing in real estate. There are many successful investors that operate without a license. And again, as I mentioned, there are some advantages, but you do not need a real estate license to begin investing in real estate. So just to give you some backfill there, my husband, Joseph, who's my business partner here on Nava Consulting LLC, he has his New York real estate license. And several years back, he convinced me to get my license. And I had back in, I can't even remember the year, 2018, I believe it was 2018, I obtained my New York real estate agent license. And the goal behind that was because in New York City specifically, you also need an agent in order to see apartments. Yes, even for rentals, you need an agent for most. Like, I don't know what the percentage is, but perhaps even 90% of apartments within New York City, you need an actual agent to set up an appointment to go see an apartment for rental. And you do get commission, which is typically 1 month's rent in New York City. And if anyone's familiar with New York City, rents range anywhere from 2,000 to even 10,000, even more depending where you are in the city, and possibly a little under that. But even then, a studio is about 1,500, 2,000. So the goal there was to have our licenses so that we can also, and this was back when we were focusing on wholesales predominantly. We weren't necessarily building our own book of business at this time, but figured it would also be a good practice or be beneficial for us to act as real estate agents, show apartments to individuals, possibly for purchase, but mostly for rentals, and earn that additional income. Nonetheless, my husband, he still holds his license, and I have since let mine lapse because for the advantages of having a license, we have him. And then there's also, in my eyes or our eyes, disadvantage to having a license. Okay, so let's dive in now to those advantages that we feel to having your real estate license. One, and the first and foremost, is access to the MLS. So this is probably one of the biggest advantages to having your real estate license is being able to access the multiple listing services is what MLS stands for. And this is a database of properties for sale. So these are at market properties for sale. And having your license allows you access to being able to find some of these deals more quickly. However, as investors, we typically do not go to the MLS for our properties. We're looking for off market properties, and that's how we tend to make our numbers work a lot easier. However, I won't say that we haven't bought off the MLS because we have. It's just not our go to. Nonetheless, having the advantage of being able to access that database is a benefit. So you are seeing those properties as soon as they hit the market, you have access to them. And also, you do not need a real estate agent to go see those properties if you have your license. Then if you don't have your license, you typically need to make an appointment with the real estate agent to go view those properties when they're on market. Number two is the potential for additional income. And I would say this kind of falls back to the example I gave you for when we originally obtained our licenses back a number of years ago, was to earn an additional stream of income. Also, even outside of New York City, if you live in any other area where you're making that income from selling or acting as a buyer's agent or a seller's agent, and you're earning that additional income, that would be great for you. However, again, for us, we aren't necessarily acting as real estate agents for any 1 ounce any longer. We are focusing on our own personal investments. However, if that is an additional source of income that you would like to be able to access, that is another benefit of you having your real estate license. And number 3 would be better market knowledge. This one I kind of go back and forth on with various different, I don't know, colleagues, but different investors within the market that we are friends with or within our circle or within our network, because it could be argued that you have better market knowledge being a real estate having your license. However, if you are predominantly focusing on investing in a particular market, I would say and argue that you have just as much, if not a deeper understanding of the market based on you heavily investing in that area. If it's a brand new area, yes, perhaps you want to rely on a real estate agent or pull someone else into your team that has a better knowledge of that particular area. If it's brand new to you or you're investing out of state, especially when it's new to you. But if you have a few properties or you grew up there or whatever it may be, or live within that community, you have just as good, if not sometimes a little bit better, of market knowledge within that vicinity. Also, networking opportunities. So, holding a real estate license can open up other opportunities for networking events, specifically for real estate agents and brokers that you would be able to have access to. Nonetheless, again, being a real estate investor, we rely very heavily on our networks, and we are going out. We're part of several different real estate investor networks across the country, both online, virtually, as well as ones that we subscribe and pay an annual membership for. So again, that's another point that I would argue is somewhat of a moot point. Yes, you potentially have access to real estate agent specific networks. However, you can easily get into those networks as well as others. Now, let's dig into some of those disadvantages. Okay. First, I think time and cost. So, not necessarily the biggest disadvantage, but it could be a disadvantage. And that would be the time. Because one, it does, in order to obtain your license, you have to take a certain amount, you have to take a class with a certain amount of hours that you're putting in. Of course, you have to study for the state test and then pass the state test. And all of that costs funds so especially in the beginning, if you are very limited on funds or don't necessarily want to go down that path, it may not be something you want to do up front. It is minimal. I don't remember the cost off the top of my head, but paying for the course was probably anywhere from one something to $300. Paying for your state exam, I wanted to say it was just over $100. Don't quote me on that because I don't remember. And it also varies depending what state you're getting licensed in. And then also remember, every 2 years, you have to pay a renewal fee. You have to take CE credits to keep your license active and actually pay the state fee to, again, renew your license. So it's not a deal breaker necessarily, but just be conscious that it does take time to obtain your license. And there is a fee associated with getting your license and retaining that license every 2 years when you need to renew it. Also, increased disclosure requirements. Now, this is the primary reason why, I've let my, one, I just didn't necessarily go and study to redo or renew my license, and also had Joseph who had his also. But the main thing was increased disclosure requirements. So as a real estate agent, you have the fiduciary right to disclose certain information to buyers and sellers. And this can complicate certain transactions and limit your flexibility compared to an unlicensed investor. Hence, I'm now an unlicensed investor, because there is just certain information you may not know about a property as far as its history. Certain things you can and cannot say, depending which neighborhoods and areas that you're investing in. And I just didn't necessarily want to have to deal with that. So even if you do have your license, so if you do have your license and you're not acting as real estate agent for the public, for buyers and sellers, but you are still trying to sell your own property after you've rehabbed it, you still have this fiduciary right. So this isn't necessarily, wouldn't say something I didn't want to do, but just have the weight on my shoulders. I go out, I speak freely, I share the information that I do have. I don't necessarily always know the whole historical information about a particular property. But either way, it adds to our team that and how we work. So Joseph has his license, I do not. And even then we invest in multiple different states now. And he only has his license and only ever has had his license in New York State. So Virginia, Tennessee, Florida, any other state that we invest in, he nor I have had our real estate licenses. Number 3, so potential conflict of interest. So if you're acting as both the investor and the real estate agent, you might face some conflicts of interest there. For example, your fiduciary right is to the client, and that might clash with your own investment goal of this property that you're trying to flip. So if you're, representing a buyer or a seller and you also have your own investment goals, then there's possibility of a clash of interest. So that's something to be conscious of as well. And then just licensing regulations. So each state has its own regulations and requirements for real estate licensees. And this rule can be complex just depending on what the laws are in your specific state. I'm not going to go into that one in much detail. This was something that had brought up by one of the investors in a group that we are members of, but just being conscious of licensing regulations. And ultimately, that brings us back to whether you need to be licensed to be a real estate investor. And again, the answer is no, but it does have some significant advantages like access to the MLS. And with that, I still feel, again, not just access to the MLS. So if you want certain information on a property, or mostly to go view that property without having to make an appointment and be at the hands of the schedule of a real estate agent. So that was probably one of my main reasons for having a real estate license. But other than that, you do not need a real estate license to invest in real estate. And the decision is yours, whether you feel like it brings you advantages or it's easier for you or whatever it may be, or you want to act as well aside from investing in real estate, but also bring in that additional income being a buyer's agent or a seller's agent for the general public, then that could be a good avenue for you as well. So that's it for today's episode. I hope that you found that helpful. Again, if you found this helpful, be sure to hit the like button, subscribe, leave a review, and share this with anyone else that you think might benefit from it or is interested in real estate and getting started and might have some of these burning questions. Please feel free to submit them, and